I'm Janet Tingy, and I am the owner and operator of Ting Tink, a knit design foundry. I'm here today to show you how to make beaded stitch markers. And stitch markers look like this. I'll put some pictures in so that you'll see them a little better, and they look like this. And they're really nice because they slide gracefully over your knitting needles, and they hold your place in lace repeats and cable patterns, and I love them. You're going to need some tools for making your stitch markers. And first thing you're going to need is some beads. I have to warn you that buying beads can be really addictive. I have this whole box full of beads. The size of bead that you need to buy is called 11/0. And if you want to say it the way the groovy chicks in the bead store say, it's 11/0. So you need your beads, and you need something to string them on. I have been using this stuff, which is called AccuFlex, and it is a special professional quality beading wire. It's got whole bunches of little strands inside a bigger strand that's all coated with nylon. You will also need something to cut that with. This is the special little wire cutting tool that I got, and what's special about it is that this edge is pretty flat, so you can get in there. Cut. This is something called a crimp plier, and it's really amazing because it's got this part here, which I'll show in a close-up photo, and it's got this part here, and this is used to crimp the circle closed. I should probably take a moment to describe the whole process that we're going to go through here. First, you put the beads on the beading wire, and then you use something called a crimp bead or a crimp tube, but I call them crimp beads. Anyway, use something called a crimp bead to close the circle, and that's where the crimp plier comes in. Then you cover the crimp tube, which is kind of smushed and ugly looking, with a crimp bead cover, and you use this identical tool. It's really cool. It does two things. What you really need is a third hand, and since I don't have one, I built one. I built it out of a little alligator clip that I bought from Joann's and some thick wire that I bought from Joann's, and then I stuck it into some cheap modeling clay that I also bought at Joann's, and then I let it dry. So this is my third hand. You'll need some little dishes to organize things on, like this. You need your crimp beads. I use a size called 2 by 1.5 millimeter bead crimp. And there are these little tubey things here. And then for the crimp bead covers, which are these little guys, the size I use is 3 millimeter. So basically on the crimp beads, they're 2 millimeters wide, and then the covers are 3 millimeters wide. And the crimp bead covers come in all different kinds of colors. And the last but not least thing that I got just the other day that's really fabulous is something called a Doris bead spinner. This is a handy dandy bead spinner, and I got this at Joann's also. What it does is it spins the beads around, and it makes it really easy for you to scoop them up onto the beading wire. So let's begin. Okay, so you have to put your beads in your bead spinner. Here it is, your bead spinner. I've loaded it up with some white and gold beads. Notice that you have to put them in this dish that comes with the bead spinner. If you put them in there, they wind up clogging the gears of the bead spinner, and that's not so good. So you put them on, you attach that together. By the way, you don't have to have the bead spinner. You can just put the beads in a dish and spear them. You can impale them with the wire. So, first step, get your beads on the wire. You hold a little teeny weeny bit out, you turn it on. And you have to just lightly skim the top, and you get some beads on there. And believe it or not, this is much faster than spearing them one at a time. Okay, that's enough to make at least one stitch marker. So we can...
About how many beads do you think you have on there?
I have a bunch. Usually I'm just doing this one little string here. Whoa! For the demo. Up, up.
Yep, down a little bit.
Down. Okay.
So that we can see it against your sweatshirt there.
Okay.
Okay.
So you can put lots and lots and lots and lots of beads on this. I put on just enough to make, you know, a stitch marker or two. But when I'm in high production mode, I just fill this up with beads and off I go. I come down to my big long line of beads, and for the smaller size of stitch marker, I use 13 beads. So there's 4, 8, 12, 13. Okay, so the next thing to do is to put a crimp bead on your wire. So you're going to take your wire and spear a crimp bead just like that. And then you're going to hold that crimp bead between your fingers and bring this around like that and give yourself enough extra wire to work with, because you're going to be shoving this end. You're going to cut it and you'll be shoving the cut end through the crimp bead. And you do that. I usually use a magnifier for this stage, but I'm not doing that now. So you shove the wire through carefully, and then you pick it up and you go like this. And you pull the wires together. And this is where the third hand comes in. You bring in your third hand. I want a third hand like this that comes off of my body. Okay, so you do that. Let's see. And then mine kind of sticks to the table, and you pull it sort of tight. You want to have a little bit of play so the crimp bead cover has room to go around, because remember the crimp bead cover is bigger. And in a two-step process here, you're going to flatten that crimp bead so that the wire going that way goes through one little side of the flattened tube, and the wire going that way goes through the other side of the flattened little tube. And to do that, you're going to use the back notch in the crimp bead pliers. And, whoops. Okay, and I tend to do that, and then you can say things to yourself that are fun and entertaining, like, I'm crushing your head. Whoops. Okay. And sometimes if I don't get it just right, I'll kind of pull to get the wires going down their little channels. And there I have my flattened crimp bead wire. And then you fold it over on itself so that it holds the two ends tightly. And that you use the front notch for that. And you go squish. And then you kind of crimp it again with the very frontmost part of the pliers. And squish. Like me, an obsessive, you squish it as many times as you can. And then you want to make sure that it's not going to go anywhere. Oops. And you say, yes, I did that part. Okay. Then you get your wire cutters and you cut each as close to the crimp bead as you can. Whoops. All right. Sorry, I know my hand just went in front there. All right, I'm going to cut this guy as close as I can. Boink. And then put your third hand away. And then you take a crimp bead cover, which looks like a little Pac-Man that's quite hungry, and you feed it. You feed it the crimp bead. And it helps to have fingernails, because you can kind of shove the crimp bead in there. Whoops. You wrestle with it. You might swear. Okay, and there you go. See, you've got your crimp bead inside your crimp bead cover. And then you get your crimp bead pliers once back to the task here, and you squish it shut. Whoop. And you squish it again to make sure the edges are all lovely and put together properly. And then you say, yippee, I'm done. I made a stitch marker.